Hi, good morning. The time is, wow, I don't even know. It's like 8:30. 8:31 per. Welcome to the Very Much So podcast. This is a new series we're doing called, it has multiple names. So let me give y'all just the idea, the tagline. It's a campaign within a campaign. I need you to see the vision. And so the titles are going to be interchangeable between if I was a marketing manager to if I was a creative strategist, between those. And this campaign, this series, this flagship on my YouTube account, on my socials, is a strategy geared to, one, show how I'm rebranding my podcast. Just as a girly with a love and a passion for marketing, no formal marketing training, but I'm still doing it, and I'm doing it in a major way, and I'm doing something unique and special. This is like a long time coming for me to, one, be able to demonstrate the process of what I'm doing with this podcast. I feel like a lot of people close to me see, but even then it's hard to show, because so far what I've done, it hasn't been organized strategically. And I feel it, one, just with Thank Me Later, right? Our old podcast, the original passion project. I would talk a lot about just having a podcast and planning for the podcast and recording for the podcast and just the highs and lows that come with being a creative. I'm very vocal about the podcast has taught me that I am a creative, number one, and that how to honor my creativity within this, and also within that, like how to honor my creative genius. And so this is like one of those brainchilds of, I am, one, showing my process. I am, two, showing the journey, and it does not have to be perfect, baby. It will not be perfect. Also, just showing my skill set of what I do every day as a marketing manager, as a content marketing manager, as a creative strategist, just all these hats that I wear, and I do a damn good job. And I think for me, this series is important because, one, like as soon as I did the rebrand, I knew I wanted to showcase how exactly I'm doing the rebrand and how this time with the podcast is different than Thank Me Later. Like how Very Much So podcast is different than Thank Me Later, just in terms of tactics and strategies and intention and consistency. You know what I mean? Like even if I had similar ideas or similar passion or determination, like this time is different. One, because I declare that it is different, and two, because Thank Me Later is a thing of the past. God is doing a new thing. Amen. Also, just within my professional life, I'm at a place where I'm not settling for roles that don't encapsulate my breadth of skills. I'm not settling for roles that are like, and no shade against these roles, because I've held these roles like coordinator and specialist, whatever the case may be. Like I am a creative strategist. I am a marketing manager. I'm not lying. It's literally things I'm doing every single day. And so I think just a byproduct of me doing this series and explaining it and showing it, baby, I will be able to just like, one, add all of this into my portfolio, because it's already like all over my resume, but also gain an audience with what I'm doing. And ultimately, really, like, I want to work with my favorite brands, y'all. Like some of the stuff we finna talk about, I'm gonna get into this video, but like Essence and food places and hotels and this, that, and the third, like I'm really just like demonstrating my skill set. And I think I am somebody who can just show you better than I can tell you, although I do a pretty good job of telling you too clearly. So this series, this project, this campaign within a campaign is gonna accomplish multiple goals, and this is just day one. So let's get into it. Right, so I'm opening my podcast. Actually, let me cut it here. Okay, I'm gonna show some clips of me working this morning because I have a whole calendar, and just being very transparent. Like y'all, I was down on my knees yesterday praying. Like I was down on my knees, and I'm just so thankful I got all this clarity for how this process is about to be rolled out within that moment, like literally at like 2 a.m. this morning. And I woke up at like, I was supposed to wake up at 5, but respectfully, I think I like got up and got started with everything around like 7, which is cool because we still on track. You hear me? We still on track. And how long do I have for this task? So we doing good on time. I was playing catch up this morning, and so one of the big things I did was write down my content pillars for the podcast, which I've never done to this level. So again, we are rebranding, we're new. I wrote down that for the rebrand specifically, yeah, let me use this. I'm sorry, I wrote this kind of confusing. I don't know why this is so big. Toggle this. Hold on. This is the campaign within a campaign. I already gave you the titles. The background for why I'm building the campaign itself is to showcase my skills, showcase my skill set. It's also to hold me more accountable for what I'm doing with the podcast. Like, I'm not just saying it, I'm actually doing it, and I'm measuring it as if I'm truly a marketing manager, which I will say I've done a lot of things as a marketing manager, as a creative strategist with this podcast. But one thing I want to improve on is my data and analytics. I want to truly have data to back up what I'm doing and use data to guide some of my decisions. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect all around, because I don't want this to feel stifled. I don't want my creativity to feel stifled. I don't want to feel suffocated, but I do want to just be able to say, like, okay, I did this. Like, I did this A/B test here. I used this hook here, and this was, converted like 30 people to listening to the podcast, whatever the case may be. My podcast in general is very unique. There is no podcast that I've heard of, that I've seen. There's nobody that I've heard of, that I've seen, that's truly talking about what it takes to manage, to market, to create for a podcast of this caliber. This is a podcast where let me give you my content pillars, because I'm doing it from a campaign within a campaign, and I'm gonna reassess this on April 30th. And so this may shift from it no longer being about the rebrand, but just being about, like, this is the podcast. But for right now, the rebrand is like the overarching content pillar. It has 4 content pillars within it. Like, say it's toggled. I'm keeping them separate, but okay, stay with me. It has 4 additional content pillars within the podcast itself, right? And this is how we're going to live out this campaign. So the reason I say it's a campaign within a campaign is because, like, the bigger thing is the rebrand, but the mini campaigns are me doing my content pillars, the things that I would talk about within the podcast, such as music, TV, 12 of 23. That's a great idea. Wait for it. And then books. This is my focus from now until April 30th, at least. I have podcast episodes related to those things. There's really no other podcast that does what I does, because I have these big content pillars, like literally, and I have a Bookstagram, so that's an additional page. I have a outside page, at Very Much Outside, that's an additional page, and the at Very Much Reading is an additional page. If you want to know how I came upon these names, listen to the testimony podcast about rebranding. I have a book club. I have just in general so much content. It's a goal of mine to, discuss my passions, because it is, the tagline for the podcast is, it's a podcast about faith. So it's a passion of mine to talk about my favorite things, but not just talk about it, but to grow an audience with my favorite things, so people can know, like, if you love Meg, if you love reading books, if you love being outside, we love that too. I love that too. And this is what I do. And so what I found as a challenge in the past, and this challenge, is being able to be consistent on how I speak to these content pillars, how it shows up in my podcast with podcast episodes. I think that's where I was getting flustered with Thank Me Later. Like, it just became, I was talking so much about, like, the creative process, that those episodes were, like, easier to publish than, like, my favorite TV show, whatever the case may be. And so again, this is just my why for this entire campaign of just rebranding and just wanting to show my process, because I feel like I'm doing something very unique. Whether it's like hard or easy, it is balancing a lot. It's using a lot of my brain, a lot of my creativity in really effective ways. And so I want to showcase that process. My goals and objectives for this campaign is I want to actively show me building this campaign, building my marketing manager, creative strategist portfolio. I want to show the imperfection of it all. And I want to do it in a way where marketing managers or CMOs or, the marketing people can understand that, like, okay, I'm being systemic with it. And so I want to format it as a campaign. I want to have certain deliverables. For example, I want to have 1 podcast episode weekly related to my campaign, which is the podcast episode, and this will be one of them. I'll be using footage like my YouTube as the audio for the podcast, and it'll also check off my 1 YouTube video weekly. I want to have cross posts on social media, so I have a TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, 3 Instagrams, and I want to just cross post on this 3 times a week. audience. And I also talked about like how I use ChatGPT. So this is one of the examples that I use, because like questions like this, I'm like, because my audience is so vast, because my topics are so vast. This is what ChatGPT gave me. I agree. So my audience are enthusiasts. So people who are interested in various forms of art, including music, film, and literature. They enjoy discussions on different genres, artists, directors, authors, and emerging trends in these fields. I will say I have a very popular video on TikTok where I just say like, what's the best R&B song of all time? And to me, it's Slowly by Tank. Listen to it. I'm gonna put that I'm gonna put the playlist that is on, as well as the TikTok in the description. But within that TikTok, I saw so many people were like, oh my gosh, like I found my people, like I love that song, I love that song. At the time, I was getting knocked upside my head, and so I didn't get a chance to like respond how I wanted to. I really recorded an episode with that song, and so I want to like kind of post that on YouTube. I'll add that into my music pillar. I know that is for real, like one of my audience, like people who want to talk about the songs that are just so daggone good, the TV shows that are just so good. And I feel like I found it here and there, but I do think that just in the consistency of my work, some of the hooks I use, it's hard for people to like actually know the value that I bring. And so I want to be clearer with that so that I can find my target audience and, you know, grow my audience and connect with them authentically. Travel and food enthusiasts. So the outside page is all about travel and like food recommendations. And so just giving an example with 12 of 23, the idea is that that will be all of what's going to cover the outside page. And so 12 of 23 is me highlighting just the awesome things I did in 2023 that I did not get a chance to talk about, because, you know, it don't matter why, but it's never too late, because baby, the content is still on my phone, the content is still on my computer. And so I did really amazing things like going to see Beyonce 3 times, going to see Usher in Vegas twice, streaming music festivals, you know, going to music festivals like Broccoli City, like Essence Fest. That's a huge one this year. And, you know, some of the places I've eaten, some of the food I had, like I went to Italy last year, I went to France last year. And so I really want to be able to talk about those things. Travel and food enthusiasts, people who love to travel and are interested in trying new cuisines, they are part of my audience too. I want to get very good at how I talk about the experiences that I've had, so people can know like, hey, this girl be doing things. I'm only going to continue going places. It's only going to get bigger and better, you know, especially this year, y'all. I turned 30 and I'm not gonna stress myself out with trying to coordinate something with other people. Like this birthday, it's gonna be me and my husband. It's gonna be me and my husband. So I feel good in that, but I do need to decide where I'm gonna go and how it's gonna look. I just want it to be safe. I want it to be restful. And I'm turning 30 this year. It sounds wild to see and hear, but it's happening. So bookworms are another piece of my audience, people who are passionate about literature. And I will say my Bookstagram is something that it has grown. It has truly grown. It really is like my fastest growing Instagram account, because for me, it makes it easy for me to find my audience with Bookstagrams, just with book content. And so I feel like in talking about books and talking about, like, I plan to do a series on Toni Morrison, and so finding my audience on Bookstagram, not only kind of like easy to me, but it's also fun. And maybe that's why it's easier, because it's like the hooks, I'm like, I can really spit them out. And so I need to like translate my skill set that I've been using for my Bookstagram, and it hasn't been the most consistent, but it will be, to these other regions and pillars, and also like film and music lovers, as well as adventure seekers. So that's my audience. Okay, my strategy. Oops, hold on. Okay, my strategy is I want to really use effective storytelling, which is something I feel like I'm a good storyteller on my podcast itself. Now, mind you, my podcast, I do love my podcast, but I've kind of described it as like chaotic, because sometimes when I just start talking, like I just want to go, and you know, I'll get there, but I really want to use effective storytelling to like pull people in, keep them going, like give value, that whole thing. And so another strategy is, by the time I create these videos and even like this YouTube, I just want to be able to point to the deliverables or goals that I've achieved. Like today, I think the deliverable was like getting these things written down. And then today I'll be working on a pillar. It's going to be music and 12 of 23, or one of both. I just wish I had more time in the day. It's gonna be 12 of 23 and or music and books. I gotta pick one because I want to do it well. So I need to pick one and then, you know, just continue to work on it. Really break down how I'm doing that campaign. So my tactics then are, I have 3 key deliverables. So one is a voiceover, like literally me. So the deliverables will be within each content pillars. For example, I would start like this. This is what I would do if I was the marketing manager of a pop culture podcast run by a Black woman who's passionate about music, TV, film, travel. And so I wanted to be clear that I'm talking about the stuff that I'm doing. And so those titles and like hooks are gonna like be interchangeable. So like that's how I'm gonna hook you in, right? And then I'm gonna start. Well, I am, you know, like for today, start a campaign called 12 of 23. Give the goal of the campaign. Show how I worked on that campaign today, which today needs to be, I need to do a teaser reel, write my script, because I want it to be really impactful. Write my script and just really demonstrate to people what 12 of 23 is going to be, what it's going to look like. Okay, I got 7 minutes. Okay, to wrap this video up. So that's just an example. I want to do like an example of an A/B test format. I want to have like a voiceover storytelling component within the campaign. Stay with me. For example, the 12 of 23 campaign, like explaining. And so that hits one thing for the 12 of 23 because it shows my process, and also hits one thing for the rebranding component. And then I want to have like a music using like songs, which is something that I love to do on Instagram and TikTok, or a trending sound, showcasing that content pillar. Like, you know, say the hook is like a point of view. You are building a campaign to talk about this, or you have a podcast episode talking about this, or you're finally showing what you did in 2023, you know, boom. And then another one is, yeah, I think I said 3 key deliverables. I feel like I meant 2. Maybe that 3 is like that A/B test, but I do want to have a graphic component to some. I don't think that's like my main focus right now. Maybe it'll change, but definitely 2. And then I want to do an A/B test. So 3. Metrics, audience growth. So how I'm growing on YouTube, you know, is this something that people are interested in learning about? Are they coming from my Instagram to my YouTube to tap TikTok followers, Instagram followers, Twitter followers for this campaign within the campaign itself, right? As well as podcast listeners. Engagement metrics. I can use Spotify for podcasters and Apple Podcasts just to track the overall podcast growth. I can use the follower count on the playlist. So for example, for playlists, I'm building one of my content strategies for music content pillar is to build a playlist with me. And so I have a playlist called For My Girls, and I've always had playlists. Again, something about my podcast that just makes it unique, makes it like an entity, honestly, is that I also have products. And so that's been one of my challenges, is that I have 2 products, at least 2 products. One is the podcast itself. One is the playlist that I'm like promoting, and then I would just say the third product is like, it's not a product, but it's like my content. Yeah, it's a product. And so I think it's been hard for me because like sometimes I can like get really molecular on the content and then I'm not promoting the podcast, or I can get really molecular on the podcast I'm promoting a playlist link, or whatever the case may be. It just can be a lot. So that's a challenge. We're gonna see how I work through that, right? Because this is a case study. Another metric, follower count on playlists. Like if I'm effectively promoting the playlist within the music content pillar using certain tactics, that playlist should show like I have like 5 followers, 10 followers, 100 followers, you know. Also, I want to do reviews on the podcast. I'm gonna just write that down and pick that up later. And then follower count on Spotify or Apple, like how many people are actually following the podcast, keeping up to it. That's been a challenge so far because it's a rebrand, right? A lot of people, or I think maybe like at least like 16 people has saved the podcast for Thank Me Later. So they were getting notifications every time that Thank Me Later would do anything, right? At least 16. Now it's, I don't even know. Maybe 1, 2 people, if that, following me on Very Much So Pod. It should be at least 2 people, right? Me and Chuki. And y'all watching this now, huh? Following me on Spotify or Apple, I need to like, and not saying that if I look at this and it's the same week after week, but it's not going to be because these strategies are going to be effective, but stay with me. I just want to just have something tangible to measure and say like, okay, like this is effective because, you know, from week 1 to week 2, I grew by 10 more people are following the podcast on Spotify, for example. So now it's shown growth. You know, these tactics are working. They're effective, as well as YouTube analytics. So how many people are actually watching the whole video? how many people, like my listener retention, like how many subs have I gained, that whole thing. Social media metrics will be huge. Likes, shares, and comments. And just let me also say this. If you want to support your creative friends, like their content, comment on their content. I'm about to have to start getting bold because I heard somebody who like really like studies TikTok say like comments like on TikTok like are really effective. And I'm about to just start sending it to people like, comment on this, comment, like say something. Like I know y'all want to like it. You see me, it's cute. And I also know like seeing your friends do something like kind of like risky, brave, putting themselves out there like that. It's like, but it's like, no. If you can comment on the funny haha video, you can comment on the videos that your friends are doing. 9 times out of 10, it's funny haha anyway. And just in general, if you are a consumer of content, like, and if you really want to support that creative, comment, share, like. Do not just like the story. That don't do shit. Sorry, not sorry. I've been told y'all this. So yeah, shares and comments for anybody who does share my content. I love you. And yeah, and eventually website traffic. And so I have a goal. I did take rebrand photos with Tony last month, and I want to use those photos to build my website launch, and I need to backwards plan that. So it was supposed to be the 15th. Today's the 8th. The 15th is next week. I pushed it back to March 31st because I want to get a clear sense of what's actually going to be on the website. So I need to backwards plan that. But then conversion rate. So again, followers, people who like actually see my content as valuable, actually are within the audience that I'm targeting, and follow me on socials, as well as clicks on the link tree, as well as converting them to actual listeners to the podcast itself. So with that, again, one of my deliverables for this is a YouTube video, which will also serve as the podcast episode. And within me doing these campaigns, because it's the campaign within the campaign, I'm also going to have a podcast talking about that pillar. So for example, 12 of 23 is going to be about essence. I'm going to be showing me editing that essence episode and just like talking about like whatever I did in that episode and like laying it out. It's gonna be fun. Again, this is a campaign within a campaign. One of my method is to like view this campaign, especially the mini content pillars or the main content pillars, but mini campaigns as like sprints. So like 10-day, 5-day sprints, and just like evaluating based off of that. But this will be a 30-day campaign, and yeah, we're gonna reassess after, you know, the 30 days, or we're gonna be reassessing every 5 days. It seems so big, but part of the challenge or just process is going to be figuring out how to make this very actionable. And so this is part 1 of As a Content Strategist I Would, a campaign within a campaign, episode 1. Okay, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Make sure you review the podcast. Follow us on our socials. Our TikTok is at Very Much So. Our Instagram is at Very Much So Pod. Our Bookstagram is at Very Much Reading. And our outside page is Very Much Outside. Stay tuned when you see the content supported, okay? And just to show y'all how I'm staying on track, I added like food and reading into my schedule. I may actually fast until like 12 until I go and get some food. So I think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm gonna fast and just start editing. Okay, go team. And also, can I just talk for 1 second about my hair? So you know, I got my chopsticks. I love my chopsticks. Honestly, one of my goals for content pillar today will be music, and so I want to talk Hiss. I want to talk Meg. I have a very fun idea, so that's coming later as well. So yeah, amazing things coming. The hair is red. I dyed it myself. I have a YouTube video on that. I need to build that in.